Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the show, My So-Called Fabulous. I am Tiffany, and it is so great to talk to you today. Come to you in the month of November to talk to you of something that's very, very special in my life and so many lives, in the lives of so many of my friends going through this. So we are bringing you in November National Adoption Awareness Month, and we are going to talk about that in different perspectives because I have people in my life that are adoptive parents, and I also have people in my life that are adoptees from birth until, my age and above. So we are sharing a perspective with you today because the goal for me is to create awareness for so many things in life. And it's not always what I know or what I don't know that's really important to you. So that's what we're doing today. And I'm bringing back this fabulous friend that has gone through what we're talking about this month. Liz Nelson, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm so honored.
I'm so happy to have you. This is number 4. 4? I can't even think.
Yeah.
So many. And you started back when you found out, I think around the day I first had you on the show many years ago. Well, 2, with True, you found out you were pregnant. She walked in like a deer in headlights. I'm pregnant. I don't feel good. So I love watching your life unfold, and you are an advocate for the community. You are a fabulous mother of 3, 2 beautiful girls, 1 feisty little girl, and a beautiful little boy, and happily married. And I'm just so happy to call you my friend.
Oh, thank you. I feel exactly the same. Thank you, Tiffany.
Everyone, she really brings a lot to the community. And I had Liz on, gosh, it was earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken, and we talked about trauma, and we talked about a lot of that. And Liz trusted me to really bring this to fruition because you have asked for it, because we all go through some form of trauma, whether you want to admit it or not. And I really think admitting it really is key. We're focusing on adoption. Liz is an adoptee. You are an adult, obviously with a family, but centered around your trauma is your process and your experience of being adopted. Am I accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
So tell us your journey.
Well, I was placed into foster care around the age of 3 to 4, and I was removed from my home because myself and 2 of my siblings were experiencing abuse. I'll speak just on my story here. I experienced physical, verbal, emotional, as well as sexual abuse. And the next couple years was just placement and replacement in different foster homes. And I was separated from those siblings as well. And then I was officially and legally adopted at the age of 6.
6. So during that time from 2, when you were removed from your home, you were in foster care.
Yes.
Right? And does that mean, and I really want to explain these terms because you and I had a conversation about this podcast, and I had to ask you what these terms meant. And so let's just assume a lot of people don't know. So foster care. When you were in foster care, that means you were in multiple homes. You could be in one home. How does that work?
Correct. So there are different relinquishment and replacement opportunities for children that may be deemed in an unsafe or under-supported environment. And so that could either be kinship, meaning going with someone in their family that's not directly the parent relationship, or it could be guardianship. That's, a temporary care placement opportunity for someone outside of the family, or maybe even a social worker to take responsibility of the children, or there's foster care. And for me, foster care was at that time via CPS, and so state mandated, and I was placed in the state's care. There are also foster care opportunities that are through adoption agencies as well.
So would you consider your experience with foster care a positive experience, or
not so much? Not so much. The situation that I was in as a child, even prior to being removed, was very complex. And, having to move into foster care didn't seem atypical, actually. We talked a little bit about this last night in preparation for our recording. I think I was used to already having to move around. I was born in San Antonio. My parents moved to the DFW area. We moved around. When I was removed from my home at that time, it was actually with my maternal grandmother, who is bedridden, depressed. So I was very used to having to move around, things feeling temporary, new faces, new people who are supposed to be taking care of me. I don't think that part of it was, I'll say, as stressful. It was very stressful when you think about the psychological and physical response that comes with that type of situation. But I just never felt like I had a sense of belonging or that I truly was loved, because everything was so temporary. So looking back and working through therapy, I can say it was not positive, and it actually, began my struggles with anxiety, depression, and PTSD that just compounded over the course of my life.
And when you and I discuss this, I have to be honest, I think about, because I do have friends of mine that have recently adopted, and friends that are desperate to have a child because they cannot have a child. And I see that part. So when you and I talked, again, creating awareness for this podcast host, that you're looking at both sides, the adoptee and the adoptive parents. Everyone's excited as their parents, and we are advocating for both. You and I are advocating for both to create awareness. I want everyone to understand that. So when you go into foster care, it's much different from being born and then just going straight into a family that's been waiting on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of dynamics, and I think that's why opening the conversation about adoption and adjusting the dialogue that has been primarily focused on parents that so desire to have a child, they're unable to have a child, or they want to help a child that's in need, and they have, maybe a surplus of love and financial support that they can do that for a child or children. But because there are so many different situations and why a child may be removed, I mean, that could be something as simple as and heartbreaking as a death of parents that was unexpected, or a family in poverty or homelessness. In my situation, my parents were drug addicts and in and out of jail or prison. And so I think that considering all pieces of the situation where the child, the adoptee to be, is prioritized is what I hope that the focus will move forward as far as, adoption and the subject of adoption goes.
Absolutely. And, Liz, being a parent myself of a 24-year-old, and I remember having a child and thinking, what do we do now? There's not a handbook.
Right.
There's not. Now we know more. We have more, in my opinion, more resources at our fingertips, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But the psychological portion of being an adoptive parent and adoptee is very different, looks very different from just having a biological child that you love and you nourish. I mean, you are going through that. You have that. You have 3 beautiful children.
Yes.
So the perspective of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think that creating awareness for these adoptive parents, you can share and shed light on when you went to your new family, you and your brothers went to your new family. Has the stigma changed? Because you said there was a stigma. I don't know how long ago it was, around 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just reading. Who knows what we're reading on the internet? Things have changed, right? So has the stigma from what you went through with your adoptive parents changed? I mean, what your rules were with being adopted?
When we consider perspective, there are different types of perspective. And, as individuals, we tend to focus on our perceived perspective in terms of what we experience. And so for me, and my perceived experience was that I was not supposed to talk about being adopted. I was not supposed to talk about my name change. There was not open dialogue in my adoptive home. And that was, in my opinion, to my brother's detriment. To pretend like it didn't happen, something that felt so dramatic and so traumatic for myself, kind of made it feel like I had done something wrong, or my value was less than, because I wanted to talk about it. In particular, going back to the abuse that I encountered, one of my parents was put on trial for certain other, criminal activities that had happened, but also for the abuse that was instilled on me and that I shared with, detectives and the court system. And I was in a place where I was prepared to go on the stand at the trial for it. But never again was that conversation opened up. And I think having to carry that around and keep it in a suppressed box within me has been extremely damaging to my spirit, and has impacted my relationships and my being able to trust other human beings. And then just going back into my role as a parent, I'm constantly questioning and constantly struggling with the motherhood role, and always wondering, is this the right thing? I have to seek out more knowledge, seek out more understanding, seek professional advice in addition to what my own experience was. Because the last thing any loving parent would want to do is to damage their child. But especially having that personal experience that I have, it's heightened to an extreme that has me constantly in a state of worry.
And stress.
Yes.
Which is tough for sure in any situation, but especially this as a child. And so go back to what you said. You actually had to go on the stand and
was prepared to do that. So what happened right before that was that my parents took a plea deal. And so I didn't have to go up there, but, I was in judge's quarters and fully prepared to do that. And I think that what I went through in that particular situation as well just made me grow up. And I feel like because of the abuse I went through, because I was not allowed to, I didn't have to take the stand. I had power removed from me, and so young. And then going back to your focus on how do I feel that impacted me in the long run in terms of being in foster care and then later adopted, I think that it constantly in feeling like I am powerless, and that my voice and my value have been, deterred, and that's something that I'm constantly seeking out.
Right. So when you go back to your childhood, however many, I'm just going to say 30 years ago, but why do you think you were silenced? What was society back then? What were we doing? Why would we not, did we just not have the education? Did we not have the research? Did we just not listen to our children back then? And I'm really not, I'm confused, but I do know life has changed. I mean, we all, thank goodness, we all have changed.
So much has changed.
Why do you think that was so important to your parents?
I think that, and I'm definitely not the expert on this. And one of the things,
neither one of us, for sure.
Yeah, I had to emphasize that last night, was that I am in this extreme learning, researching stage of being an adoptee and empowering myself in the ways that I feel like would best support me and my longevity. But I think it really goes back to incentive. What is the true incentive globally, nationally, when we look at international versus domestic adoption, what's the incentive? I think a lot of times it has been profit-based. And I think that tends to skew a lot of things. As you know, we have open discussion about that in a lot of different aspects with, you know, the world and the economy and decisions made. But as far as my parents go, I think they, you know, we always are told as adoptees, they did the best they could with what they had. Everyone has their own experience and has their own traumas. And I think that because there has been lack of education and an open discussion offered to birth parents, adoptive parents, with an adoptee's voice being centered there, we were just ill-equipped at that time. So now I feel like more professionals are offering to the community to speak more openly about things and speak their experience, that we can actually open our eyes and become more aware of things that were maybe sifted to the side or hidden from us, like with adoption agencies and the CPS state system.
Would you consider your adoption closed adoption?
Yes.
Because I've read the closed adoption and open adoption. So yours was very closed.
Closed, yeah. And what I was told as I got a little bit older was that it was closed for safety reasons. So they were concerned that if the parents were not in prison, that they would come to try to find us and take us. And I know that safety and the health of a child, it should be and was in my situation a top priority. But because of that, I also felt like I wasn't allowed any other information about what happened to me or where my family is, medical history, things like that.
Yes. And birth certificate.
Birth certificate. Mm-hmm.
You don't have your original birth certificate.
No.
And that is a right and when you told me that, I'm so flabbergasted. It seems like a right as a human. Am I wrong? I mean, I don't understand I guess if you don't want the child to know, you know, which brings on so many thought processes. Back to what you were saying about the health. Mm-hmm. You and I are at this phase of our life of, I mean, you know, I'm not a spring chicken and you are, but health problems and health issues. And when you go and you have to fill out your health history, I know my mother's deceased and I still didn't ask her enough questions. Mm-hmm. You know, I just, you know, I think, oh, it's selfish. No, I just didn't think I thought I was going to be invincible and never be sick.
Right.
So not having that history is critical, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, medical history, going into a doctor's office, I've just been used to, over my lifetime, them asking, what's the medical history, or do you have a history of this or that? Especially when I have gone through different health crises type situations. And it's what the situation is I have to report I was adopted. They maybe check a box on my medical forms, or they jot it down as a note, and then that's just the end of it. And, you know, I never thought anything was unusual with that. I thought that was just part of, you know, going through the motions. And, you know, again, I was told not to talk about what I had gone through or being adopted. But now as an adult, and especially as a nurse, I find that to feel very unfair, and that I had rights taken from me that without my consent or awareness, you know. I wish there was some opportunity, or providers were educated in a way to say, okay, you were adopted and these are the symptoms that you've experienced, or let's run this series of panels on you to rule out certain things, just like they have for women who are pregnant. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they do genetic testing. I wish they had that, you know, something else to consider as we move forward in the adoption dialogue.
Yes, because it's very expensive. I mean, tests are very, very expensive, and finding out your DNA and all of those things. So very expensive. But I was so shocked. And when you told me, because going to the doctor and checking a box, well, that doesn't make it all right. That's
Right.
not, I mean, you know nothing. That just is so amazing to me. Has it changed at all? Has knowing that, was that bring up the topic of an open adoption, right?
Mhm.
Because is that fairly common now, right? An open adoption.
I think that's being promoted more. There are a lot of neurological studies and psychological studies that have been occurring and are occurring, I think, more now, or at least I'm more aware of them, and understanding what happens with relinquishment of a child and removing a child from their birth mother. There are a lot of developmental and physical things that happen to individuals when they are removed from their mother. A lot of the studies are up to age 2, but with personality development, it is up to age 6, and how that creates lifelong traumatic grief, which presents as physical symptoms and ailments. There's studies out that are showing that adoptees are 4 times higher risk for suicide and 2 times higher risk for developing disabilities like PTSD and other things. And I think with having open adoption, there are probably different types of openness, and we talked about boundaries earlier, and how you figure that out, what is going to be most healthy and most ethical for especially the adoptee and the birth family, but including everyone that's part of the adoption conversation in that. Everybody.
Did you, when you decided, you and Reggie decided to have a family, I know I went through it, I guess, and I don't have the trauma, but does this affect you, that you felt like your role as a mother? Did your history with where your journey of being an adoptee, through your relationships, did you question that at all?
Thinking back on this, there has been a transformation in how I've approached that. My initial thought in wanting to be a mother, and this started as a child in playing with baby dolls, was I want to have my own children because I want to give them a life that I didn't have. We talked about that in the trauma episode that we did together. But I think we have 3 children, 11, 7, and 2. And over that course of 11 years, how I feel about it has changed a lot based on what I've learned and just, my maturation as an individual. And I think that being a parent is very complicated.
Ugh.
I mean, go back a square. Having relationships is very complicated.
With anyone.
With anybody. Having relationships with complex trauma, compounded trauma, is very a fragile thing to approach. Parenthood, yes. But then parenthood, when you've been through the adoption process, you're an adoptee that has a lot of trauma. Everything I do, I question my full approach to parenting, whether they are in the house with me, and I am guiding them and modeling to them what I feel like will provide them the life that they need to support themselves spiritually, emotionally, physically, but also to be supportive in the community as a citizen. But going outside of the home, inviting other people in, allowing them to go other places, the complexities that we've gone through with the world since the pandemic and violence and things like that. It's just, I question things a lot, and that worry button is so hard to turn off because of what I know and this fog that I've carried and this pain that sits inside me. I just don't want them to have to go through that, knowing that I can't keep them away from all pain. But at the same time, as a parent, you just want to protect your children at all costs.
At all costs. And it never goes away.
It never goes away.
Well, you and I were talking about this yesterday. I mean, I would ask my dad, he never stops worrying about me, and I'm 58 years old, I mean, he never stops worrying about me, and his job is not done. at all. I don't think your job is ever done. I don't think I will ever stop parenting Kennedy, I mean, but she's parenting me a little bit now.
Right.
For sure. But, I don't think that ever stops. I really don't. So, Liz, let's talk about friends that we have that have adopted at birth.
Okay.
What advice would you give as an adoptee to these fabulous people that are adopting, that, like you and I, didn't have a handbook, whether you have them biologically or you adopt them? Mm-hmm. What would be some pieces of advice? Because that's what people want to hear.
Right. I think let's just keep it basic and keep it adoptee centered. So any decisions that you're going to make or in planning for that life with that child, keep it adoptee centered. Consider where they came from biologically. Consider what they're going to go through developmentally, what questions they may have. Practice your dialogue as they go through those developmental milestones. Seek out your resources, and that could just be speaking to someone that that is a adoptive parent or is an adoptee at different ages. I'm a firm believer in improving and growing your perspective. And, there's that saying that says your perspective grows and changes kind of based on where you are seated at the table. Adjust your seat at the table and gain new understanding, and maybe that'll provide opportunity for clarity and being the best that you can be with the adoptee as the center.
Mm-hmm. In your opinion, again, we're not experts on this.
No.
Experience. One of us has experience. Is there if you have this child at birth, is there an age? Does research show the age that you should start talking about it? Because kids, think about True. Think about your kids. Think about that. Is there, I've looked online and there's a few ranges, but
I think it's very situational. I think it's it depends on where you are as a parent and your growth and understanding, where the child is. Is the child coming with typical development, or are there some other things, some barriers that you may have to be considered? But I know there are so many more books out there, children's books that, can create relatability for the children and allow them to feel like they can openly discuss how they feel and maybe memories and things like that. As a mother and adoptee, I struggle with it. My oldest and both of my girls know that I'm adopted, but I haven't gone into the story. I'm kind of more approaching it as, let's look at a very basic foundational approach to discussing this with them. The other part of that is, you kind of need to resolve barriers that you may have yourself. So for me as an adoptee, it's kind of working through the healing process and be able to speak about it, which I can now as evidence right here, without breaking down and wanting to isolate myself for a few days. But with adoptive families, make sure that you address anything that could be that could cause an issue with your communication with your child. Are there certain triggers, which we talked about in our trauma episode, mm-hmm. that you want to address and maybe practice before discussing with a child? There could be certain words that make you feel super uncomfortable. If you're in a situation as an adoptive parent where you do have a partner that you can practice with, or a professional, whether that's a social worker, psychologist, etc., that can actually guide you on that. And as far as therapists, I would say therapists that do have involvement and a lot of experience with the adoption process, whether they're an adoptee, adoptive parent, or they've worked in the system a lot. I think there's just a lot of opportunity to customize it based on your child and your own needs.
So Liz, talk to the adoptees that are in your shoes. What have you done to heal? What are you doing, present, past, and future? What are you doing to heal? How can you share that? Like what? There's someone that's listening that needs to hear this.
Yeah, and I so hope so. It's actually been kind of difficult to connect with adoptees. And so what I've done just in my familiarity with social media is I've gotten on Instagram, and you can literally search like a Google search on Instagram's platform, adoptees, adoption support, adoption legislation, and just filter through those accounts and see if you can find anything that speaks to you. There are resources on those accounts, websites. Though oftentimes people who are in the adoption realm will tag other accounts that they have found that are useful or for the cause. And so that's kind of where I've started. I always will encourage having a therapist wherever you are in your therapy and healing journey. Have someone on board and available to you. Mental health should always be top priority. Don't rush the process. Take your time and just seek out connection, because I feel like that's part of that sense of belonging that's instilled in all of us as human beings.
You know, you shared with me a couple of Instagram accounts, Open Adoption Project. This was very powerful. I read this on one of her Instagram posts. Adoptive parents have an enormous responsibility to bring psychological safety to their homes and families, which includes their children's first families. Findings holds answers for adoptive families who want to create an environment of openness so each family members know that they can talk about the hard parts of adoption and still be accepted. That's powerful, right?
It's powerful.
I mean,
the adoption process is so complex. And when we talk about who all is included in that, it is numerous people, and that makes things scary. It makes things challenging, and I think maybe that's also a part of why, like you were saying, in the last 30 years, that it hasn't been a supportive discussion. The adoption process and the adoption industry, which is really what it is. So I think that is important. And again, identifying the best approach for your family and for the adoptee is where people can get started with that.
Absolutely. You know, I was talking, I told you when I did some research on the 10 tips for raising the adopted child. We've hit them all. But one that I thought was just really, really great for people with multiple children is to make sure you prepare your siblings, the older siblings and new ones coming in. Can you imagine? I mean, your kids are used to your undivided attention, right? So bringing in another person, they need to be prepared for that, right?
Right. I mean, and that's a subject that comes with biological children as well, you know, preparing for siblings, you know, but with parents that have a biological child, there should be a different discussion and maybe different books as resources to incorporate in that, supporting that child and supporting the family as a whole with bringing in an adopted child, and vice versa. If the family already has adopted children and they're bringing another child in, that child is going to have different background, different story, and need to be, you know, supported in their own unique ways as well. And so I think that's just a great way to have open communication and full love and support in a family.
Absolutely. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate you. You bring so much joy to so many people. And your story, I know it's difficult. I mean, I've known you a while, and I know it's difficult. And I mean, it strikes on my heart, a string in my heart, because I know you are struggled and you're just teaching so much. I told you that when you did the trauma. Y'all go back and listen to Liz and I talk about trauma that you've been through, and you'll see that we're not alone. I mean, there's people that need help, and you're helping so many.
Well, thank you. That's a major goal of mine.
Absolutely. And, you know, we are advocating for both the parents and the adoptee during National Adoption Awareness Month. And so go get your white ribbon. I do know that. See, I'm learning constantly. How can we find you, Liz?
You can find me on Instagram, #FWLizDiane.
Oh, my goodness. And she's a beautiful, beautiful person. She's a fabulous nurse esthetician. And she's a go-getter. Just love her.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I hope we bring awareness. And if you ever have questions, just DM me anytime. You can see all of this information in the show notes. And y'all, do your part. Be nice. Be a good person. And keep being fabulous.